Our buddy Daniel Turner and his group Power the Future with a big explosive report that's making a ton of news today on finding out what they've learned regarding Biden's executive orders. And joining us now, the man himself, Daniel Turner. What's up, brother? How you doing?
Hey, Rich, great to be on with you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining me. It was great to see you last week in New York,
It
and
was.
here we are once again. We're at it again. So you guys, you looked into this and you did a little analysis here. So tell us about it.
Yeah, the Autopen story has is just starting to unfurl, I should say, right? And it seems to be getting a lot of momentum. And we wanted to look at some of the climate and energy executive orders that the president signed and see if we could find any evidence that Joe Biden himself was aware of it. And by aware, we would mean he spoke about it in a speech. He was asked by the press. He was on Air Force One, and the reporter said, "Mr. President, yesterday you signed." Um, and we put out a list of several executive orders where there is literally no evidence. There is no on the record evidence that Joe Biden directed consented to, was cognizant of these executive orders. All we have is an Autopen signing a document and then a statement on the White House website or on the White House Twitter account saying today Joe Biden signed this executive order banning offshore drilling, right? Like big things. I mean, not tiny things, like really, 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 really big things. There's no evidence Joe Biden was even aware these things were done in his name. So that's why we are calling for this investigation.
And when we say there's no evidence, meaning there's no speeches. He doesn't do a White House ceremony. There's no, when Trump brings everybody into the Oval Office and signs the executive order, and he makes a big to do about it. You're saying there's nothing like that took place here.
No, there's not even any physical evidence of the president signing it. There's no staffers who witnessed it, right? The president signs lots of executive orders, but they're on the record, right? And there are administrative personnel who witness it, and usually there are photos involved, or at least there's commentary. Of course, Trump does grandiose things. He holds it up for everyone to see. He invites people into the room. But on some of these really big, and again, these aren't executive orders saying, Thursday is Rich Zeoli Day in Philly, which would be a great honor. Don't get me wrong,
No,
right?
every day, every Thursday
Every
is
Thursday is Rich Zeoli Day in all of Philly, right? These are executive orders saying we are going to ban the sale of natural gas. Right, like that's a big thing. That's a BFD, as the kids would say. I don't know if the kids are saying that anymore, but the kids used to say, right, that's a really big deal. We're not going to allow the sale of liquid natural gas anymore. Nope. I have declared that it is no longer allowed to be exported. Well, that should have some on the record commentary, and there's nothing. There's no evidence that Biden himself made the decision, knew of the decision, and so we're wondering if they're even remotely legitimate, and who made the decision.
So as your organization Power the Future puts this report out and points all this out, because I agree with you. I mean, these are big darn deals. All right. These are not minor things here. This isn't just naming a day after somebody. These are very consequential actions that the president right now, this president, is trying to undo, and he's being held up in court. This is why this is very relevant, because every time the president now tries to undo one of these executive orders from Biden, there's a federal judge who jumps in and stops him along the way.
Mhm.
You put out this
Yeah.
report. How has it been received so far?
Well, I think the timing was perfect because there are lots of people questioning the use of the auto pen. The president himself is, and you couple that with the Jake Tapper book and other books that have come out where people are saying, "Hey, look, Biden really wasn't running the show. His
Yeah.
staff was. Biden was kept in the dark." So it's adding to this larger narrative that we didn't have a Biden presidency for 4 years. We had a puppet government, and that's not what the American people elected. And when they cast a vote, for those people who cast a vote for Joe Biden, they didn't cast a vote for a puppet regime. And for the side that is constantly yelling about threats to our democracy and everything is a threat, sneezing is a threat to our democracy. They ran the most undemocratic little autocracy, autopencracy, in American history. And I think heads need to roll. I mean, people do need to be held to account. People need to be criminally charged because they're impersonating the president, right? It's not just staffers taking a
Yeah.
little bit of leniency. They're impersonating the president, and that has to be criminal.
Yeah, and we know from the Jake Tapper book that they were planning for a second term where they would do a full-on weekend at Bernie's, and they would just every now and then show proof of life, I guess, by holding him on the Truman balcony and waving and. But they were going to run the government, and they were fully prepared to do this. And my point is, if you're fully prepared to do that, if that's something that you're willing to do, why weren't you doing it already? And the answer probably is you were. And that's the thing. I think these people had no moral quandaries doing that. None of them felt an obligation to the Constitution to say, the 25th Amendment requires us here to get rid of this guy. No, they were fully going to go in, justifying it by saying Donald Trump is such a threat to democracy, along with sneezing, that this is what we have to do, Daniel Turner. So that
Yeah.
means to me that they would have already been doing those things, which proves that Biden was not in charge and they were running the country because these people figured, look, Biden's the only guy that can beat this guy. We have to act like the government is still functioning and doing all these things. And then, by the way, the other fact of this is these are power hungry people. These are progressive kooks who have no one stopping them. They can do whatever they want to do. And if they don't have to worry about getting the president's okay, they can just go ahead and do it. And there's no way to stop them. They're going to do it because this is the ultimate power grab.
It really is. And a couple weeks ago, a couple months ago, Speaker of the House Mike Johnson made a commentary about how when the one time he sat down with Biden, he asked about the liquid natural gas, the
Yep.
LNG pause. And he said Biden didn't know what I was talking about. And Speaker Johnson interpreted that as, wow, he seems to be a lot more mentally incapacitated than we realized. But now I'm wondering, maybe he didn't know what Speaker Johnson was talking about because he literally didn't know what he was talking about because he
Yeah.
didn't know he did it because someone did it on his behalf. And that's why this Autopen thing is really problematic. If you just put the president in a closet, go to your weekend house in Delaware, we'll run the show. And then you put out statements on his social media, you put out statements on the White House website and sign these executive orders. Well, that's not how the presidency works. There's a lot of question as to how legitimate executive orders are to an extent anyway. I understand that. But the abuse of the system that staffers are now writing and signing executive orders in the president's name is just a level of deceit against the American people that we haven't seen before, and that's why I say heads have to roll.
Daniel Turner's with me. Power of the Future is his organization. He's the founder and the executive director, powerofthefuture.com. Yeah, look, I totally agree with you on this point. And like I said, if it wasn't for the fact that the president now to undo executive orders, because let's face it, executive orders are only temporary as long as the executive is there. But this executive now has to undo what Biden's done, and he's getting blocked at every turn by a federal judge. You mentioned how consequential these executive orders were. One of them you said was to stop offshore drilling. That's a very, very big deal. And what are some of the other extremely consequential executive orders and actions that we're talking about here?
Yeah, the ban of offshore drilling, the ban of exploration in the Arctic, the ban of additional drilling in the strategic petroleum reserves in northern Alaska. There was an executive order that artificial intelligence had to come from green energy. What was the damage that was done to the AI industry, right?
Mm-hmm.
Was it hampered for a little while because people wanted to do an AI startup and said, well, holy crap, there's an executive order that we have to use wind and solar. There goes that idea. The LNG pause, I think, is the one that for me is the most painful because and you know this from the great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, there are millions of mom and pop shops in the oil and gas business. Not everyone is Exxon, right? There are lots of
Yep.
rich Zeoli oil where, you mortgage the house and you convince your wife that we're going to do this and we're going to put everything into this business. And, they run huge gambles. Lives were destroyed with that pause. Like businesses went bankrupt. People who put everything on the line for this industry were told overnight by the president, no, you're actually going to be prohibited from from selling your product. You know that people were driven to bankruptcy, and bankruptcy always brings with it divorce and suicide and
Mhm.
depression and alcoholism. And it's quite frankly the same BS, Rich, that we saw with COVID, right? Like if you don't get the jab, you're going to get kicked out of the Marine Corps. How many military men, how many lives were destroyed all by these staffers who were making decisions because they have bones to pick. I don't like oil and gas, so we're gonna stop you from like the I have to contain my rage and my anger because Power of the Future started because of energy workers, and energy workers got punished because a bunch of little green commies in the White House realized they had an incapacitated old man and they pulled the wool over the people's eyes and they get off on it. Like that's it. Like, oh well, yeah, well, we're not gonna do that anymore. Hell no. I'm coming
Yeah.
after them. I want them in
Yeah.
jail. Like
Yeah.
I want their lives ruined the way they ruined the lives of coal miners when they passed executive orders about shutting down every coal plant in America. I want these people destroyed because that's what they deserve because they're evil and they need to suffer for what they've done to the American people.
Yeah, good for you for saying that because they are evil and they do need to suffer. And I hope that James Comer will get to the bottom of this. That guy who is the chief of staff to Doctor, and you always have to say that by law, Dr. Jill Biden. This guy apparently now, according to Project Veritas, and Matt, if you could find that clip for me, um, apparently, according to this guy was like running the show. They had this undercover thing with David Hogg, who's the vice chair of the DNC, and he's a lunatic. But this guy's going on about just how powerful this guy really was. And as James Comer brings these people forward, including the former White House physician, and that guy is going to say whatever doctors, but we know the powerful people that were there that were running things. But we hear the names like Ron Klain, for example, the former White House chief of staff. We hear that all the time. But this is cut 13.
Yes, nice to meet you. Yeah. Off the record, of course. Foundational question for me is like, how corrupt is the DNC if so many people knew, or few people knew about Biden? Well, the president of the United States.
I mean, I think the fact of the matter is the DNC is always going to be like a campaign arm of the president, ultimately. The bigger issue was like the inner circle that was around Biden. That's it.
And I can't stress to you enough.
Like Joe Biden's chief of staff, like had an enormous amount of power.
Joe Biden?
Joe Biden's chief of staff.
That was like an open secret at the level. Like, I would avoid him. Like, he was scary.
What was his name?
Anthony from
I've never seen him.
Exactly.
What do you mean?
He's like a shadowy, like, Wizard of Oz type figure. That's what made him so, like, I knew how he looked, but I'm like, the general public wouldn't know how this man looked. But he wielded an enormous amount of power, and I can't stress to you how much power he had in the White House.
See, like that's crazy. Daniel, that's nuts to me that this guy was so powerful and so in charge and was able to wield such power. Who are the other people that were there running the show?
Yeah, and it's not surprising because the first lady was really running the show, puppeting Joe Biden around, the South America and on these NATO trips. And when it comes to the green issues, I mean, I'd like to see the role that John Kerry had, that Gina McCarthy had, that John Podesta had. Right, there are a lot of green activists who were in the Biden White House who just finally had their hands on power and are climate lunatics. They hate the fossil fuel industry, and they had unchecked ability to pass executive orders. So I think a lot of them have to be held to account. Again, to pass a ban on offshore drilling is a big deal, right?
Yeah,
like
it's
it's
a
a
big
really,
deal.
really big deal. And you almost want to go back now and ask the media, like, where were you guys?
Well, and I think the ban on liquid natural gas. I mean, you talked about the emotional impact and the financial impact on these people. What about the political impact? Because I remember saying a million times, I cannot believe when you have to win Pennsylvania that we still have a ban on the export of liquid natural gas. That made no sense to me, but it makes sense if you think the people who are there are just zealots who are going to do whatever the hell they want because they know they're not going to be there much longer. It's a question of the zealots are in charge now, which also explains a lot of the crazy people that got pardoned by the president, and it explains why they made sure that nobody associated with the January 6th committee or Fauci or any of these people, they pardoned all of them because they were zealots who wanted to just do whatever they wanted to do, and they weren't thinking about the political calculations of this. Because I would have to think that the Joe Biden of 20 years ago, maybe not even that long ago, would say that banning liquid natural gas in an election year when you have to win the state of Pennsylvania is one of the all-time dumbest political moves you could ever do. And that Joe Biden would scream and say, "What are you people, idiots? We're going to lose Pennsylvania." And yet this Joe Biden, the one that who had lost his brain, didn't even know that it was happening, according to Speaker Mike Johnson. So clearly these were zealots who were in charge, who didn't give a damn about the politics nor the Constitution, by the way, Daniel Turner. So I give you guys great credit for writing this report and for exposing this. I hope that James Comer uses this. I hope everybody uses this, because we got to get to the bottom of this. Everybody deserves the truth. So thank you, my friend.
Thank you. I appreciate the chance to talk about it on your show.
Always. Daniel Turner, Power of the Future.